Good afternoon on this October 7th. I'm Yumna Naufal. These are today's headlines. Future movement leader Saad Hariri meets with French President François Hollande at the Elysée Palace in Paris. Relatives of the soldiers and policemen held hostage by Islamists give a 24-hour ultimatum to the government. And in Syria, the U.S.-led coalition renews airstrikes on positions held by Islamic State jihadists in Kobani, a day after Islamic State militants penetrated the town. The head of the Future Movement, MP Saad Hariri, held talks with French President François Hollande in Paris on the latest local and regional developments. The former premier said after the meeting at the Elysée Palace that the presidential elections should take place before parliamentary ones. The Future Movement, he said, will not participate in the parliamentary polls, but should they be held in light of the presidential vacuum? He did declare this before reporters, stressing that they seek the election of a president as soon as possible. The two leaders tackled bilateral ties and the Saudi Arabian grant to the Lebanese army. And in September, Prime Minister Tamam Salam and Foreign Minister Gibran Bassil held separate meetings with Hollande on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York. France is currently discussing with Lebanon the delivery of arms to the Lebanese military under a $3 billion Saudi grant. Relatives of the captive soldiers and policemen have released a statement giving the government an ultimatum, asking them to clarify the exact status of the ongoing negotiations to free the hostages within 24 hours, or they will close more roads. The statement said the protesters will refrain from blocking any roads until Wednesday morning as a sign of goodwill, with the exception of the protest campsites at Dahr al-Baydar and Kalamoun. The families and supporters of the 21 Lebanese security personnel that have been held hostage by Islamist militants since early August have been blocking vital roads over the past few weeks, demanding more efforts by the government to secure their release. And so, Future Movement leader Saad Hariri and Kataib Party leader Amin Gemayel also said they will not change their stance on backing the March 14 presidential candidate. The two party leaders said their basic agreement gives priority a supporting presidential candidate from the coalition. Gemayel met with Hariri in Paris as well over the weekend to discuss regional developments in the country and said upon returning to Lebanon that the alliance between them remains strong. Prime Minister Tamam Salam says he cannot offer any promises to the families of the Lebanese soldiers and policemen held hostage, but that the Qatari-conducted negotiations are ongoing. He made it clear from the beginning of the crisis, starting with the clashes in As-Sail in early August, that the hostage takers are abnormal groups who cannot offer guarantees and that he does not have a magic wand to solve the crisis. While both relatives of the captured are in Islamic State custody, they have been accusing Lebanese authorities of procrastination. The Prime Minister has insisted all efforts are being exerted to release them. The U.S.-led coalition has renewed airstrikes on positions held by Islamic State jihadists in the southwest of Kobani, a key Syrian town on the Turkish border. The strikes come a day after the extremists pushed into Kobani, seizing 3 districts in the city's east after fierce street battles with its Kurdish defenders. Linda Tamim has the details.
A strong Turkish military presence was amassed on the country's border with Syria, a day after Islamic State militants raised their black flag on the strategic town of Kobani. Fighters from ISIL have penetrated the Syrian town for the first time, sparking street-to-street fighting and an order from its Kurdish defenders for all civilians to flee. Warplanes believed to have been sent by the U.S.-led coalition struck positions held by Islamic State militants in the area that beleaguered Kurdish forces have been struggling to defend. The airstrikes began late on Monday and came as Kurdish forces pushed Islamic State militants out of the eastern part of the town. The U.S.-led coalition has launched several airstrikes over the past 2 weeks near Kobani in a bid to help Kurdish forces defend the town, but the strikes appear to have done little to slow the Islamic State group, which captured several nearby villages in a rapid advance that began in mid-September. The assault has forced some 160,000 Syrians to flee and put a strain on Kurdish forces, who have struggled to hold off the extremists. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says hundreds more civilians fled Kobani on Monday as the jihadists advanced. Large numbers of refugees from the area are now camped out in Suruk district in Turkey's Sanliurfa province. This morning, police used water cannon and tear gas in an attempt to disperse demonstrators along the border, protesting against the Islamic State groups advanced on Kobani. Protesters blocked the streets, stopped cars and conducted identification checks as they let off fireworks and opened fire into the air. They hurled petrol bombs at armored police vehicles as riot officers retaliated with tear gas and smoke grenades. The protests were not isolated to the Turkish-Syria border. Media reports say police in Istanbul and at least 6 other Turkish cities clashed with demonstrators. So far, Turkey has made no move to join the fight against Islamic State close to its borders, beyond returning fire at Islamic State fighters in response to mortar shells landing on Turkish territory. Ankara is wary of helping Syrian Kurdish forces near Kobani, as they have strong links with the Kurdistan Workers' Party, known as PKK, which the Turkish state fought for 3 decades. However, President Tayyip Erdogan vowed to retaliate if ISIL attacks Turkish forces. Turkish tanks deployed along the border for the 2nd time in a week on Monday, some with guns pointing towards Syria, in an apparent response to stray fire.
A 19-year-old American left a letter expressing disgust with Western society before trying to board an international flight in Chicago, the first step in his plan to sneak into Syria to join the Islamic State group, according to a federal criminal complaint. Muhammad Hamza Khan, who lived with his parents in the Chicago suburb of Bolingbrook, was arrested on Saturday at O'Hare International Airport trying to board a plane on the first leg of connecting flights to Turkey, which borders Syria. He is charged with attempting to provide material support to a foreign terror group, which carries a maximum 15-year prison sentence. Khan appeared in a federal court in an orange jail clothes, calmly telling a federal magistrate he understood the allegations. His parents were also in court. About 8 dozen Americans are believed to be fighting in Syria, while more than 100 have either been arrested or on their way to eventually come back. Coming up next, a Spanish nurse becomes the first person to contract the Ebola virus outside of Africa. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching the 4:20 o'clock news on Future TV. The White House rejected criticism from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, accusing him of refusing to acknowledge how much help the United States has been to Israel over the years. Netanyahu on the CBS program Face the Nation said U.S. criticism of an Israeli move for a new Jewish neighborhood in East Jerusalem was against American values.
Well, I did see the Prime Minister's remarks, and it did seem odd for him to try to defend the actions of his government by saying that our response did not reflect American values. The fact is, American policy has been clear and unchanged under several administrations, both Democrat and Republican. We oppose any unilateral actions that attempt to prejudge final status issues, including the status of Jerusalem. These can only be legitimately determined through direct negotiations between the parties that this president has worked hard to try to facilitate. We would also note that the Prime Minister appeared only to be addressing our concerns about Silwan and seemed to ignore our concern over reports that the Israeli government had moved forward the planning process in the sensitive area of Gavat Hamatos in East Jerusalem. That action is contrary to Israel's stated goal of negotiating a permanent status agreement with the Palestinians, and it would send a very troubling message if they were to proceed with tenders or construction. You know, the fact is, when it comes to American values, it's American values that lend this country's unwavering support to Israel. It's American values that have led us to fight for and secure funding to strengthen Israel's security in tangible ways. It's American values that have led us to fund and build an Iron Dome system that have protected the lives of countless innocent Israeli citizens. It's American values that have led the United States to fully support Israel's right to defend itself, and it's American values that have led us to defend Israel in a variety of international forums, including a variety of United Nations forums. So it's clear how American values dictate, or at least guide, our thinking when it comes to our unwavering support for the nation of Israel.
The trial of former Bosnian Serb leader Radovan Karadzic is entering its last day at the United Nations War Crimes Court. Karadzic is on trial for war crimes, genocide, and crimes against humanity committed during the war in Bosnia in the 1990s, including the Srebrenica massacre, the worst in Europe since the Second World War. The prosecution has asked for a life sentence for him. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani is calling for more academic freedom in the universities of Iran, saying restrictions hinder innovation and will lead to brain drain. Speaking at a ceremony marking the beginning of the academic year, the Iranian president said irrelevant restrictions on universities will lead to the departure of honest, competent individuals, and that university professors should be able to make comments and have opinions that differ from those of the ruling establishment. He was elected last year on a moderate platform promising to promote more openness in Iran, but his attempts at reform have been met with resistance from the more hardline elements of Iran's government. The Spanish health minister has confirmed that a nurse who treated 2 victims of Ebola in Madrid has tested positive for the disease. This is the first known case of someone contracting Ebola outside of Africa. The woman was part of the medical team that treated 2 Spanish priests, both of whom have died from the virus, which has claimed some 3,400 lives now since the outbreak in West Africa. This all comes as United States President Barack Obama says his administration is working on additional protocols for screening airplane passengers to identify people who might have Ebola, and would step up efforts to make medical professionals aware of what to do if they encounter a case.
I know that the American people are concerned about the possibility of an Ebola outbreak, and Ebola is a very serious disease. And the ability of people who are infected to carry that across borders is something that we have to take extremely seriously. At the same time, it is important for Americans to know the facts, and that is that because of the measures that we've put in place, as well as our world-class health system, and the nature of the Ebola virus itself, which is difficult to transmit, the chances of an Ebola outbreak in the United States is extremely low. And I'll be very honest with you, although we have seen great interest on the part of the international community, we have not seen other countries step up as aggressively as they need to. And I said at the United Nations, and I will repeat, that this is an area where everybody has to chip in and everybody has to move quickly in order for us to get this under control. Countries that think that they can sit on the sidelines and just let the United States do it, that will result in a less effective response, a less speedy response, and that means that people die. And it also means that the potential spread of the disease beyond these areas in West Africa becomes more imminent. So I'm going to be putting a lot of pressure on my fellow heads of state and government around the world to make sure that they are doing everything that they can to join us in this effort. We've got some small countries that are punching above their weight on this, but we've got some large countries that aren't doing enough. And we want to make sure that they understand that this is not a disease that's going to discriminate, and this is something that all of us have to be involved with.
Russian President Vladimir Putin turns 62 today, with his approval ratings near the all-time high despite the pressure from the West following Russia's annexation of Crimea. This is on the eve of his birthday. Moscow's central gum department store located on Red Square started selling sweatshirts with presidential portraits on them. Dozens of people lined up to buy items with Putin featuring iconic images of him on horseback, wearing a navy cap or dark sunglasses, or even hugging a tiger. The collection on sale includes 3,000 sweatshirts and 5,000 T-shirts. Vladimir Putin's spokesman said the president intended to celebrate his birthday away from people in the Siberian taiga. This ends our bulletin for today. Let me remind you of our top stories. Future movement leader Saad Hariri meets with French President François Hollande in Paris. Relatives of the soldiers and policemen held hostage by the Islamists give a 24-hour ultimatum to the government. And in Syria, the U.S.-led coalition renews airstrikes on position held by ISIS in Kobani a day after they have penetrated the town. Those are your headlines live on this Tuesday. I'm Yumna Naufal signing off. Have a good one.